Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Lessons Learned. My name is Vincent Pezza. I am an author and the founder of HTN, Hidden Treasure Novels Enterprise. I'm also a member of the Association of Christian Fiction Writers, the North Carolina chapter. And I'm so pleased today to introduce to you a fellow chapter member, in fact, one of the founding members of that chapter, Felicia Bridges, an author who is going to share with us today some of the lessons she's learned as an author and some of the lessons she's learned along life's highway. I was so pleased to learn that she is also an Army brat, and we were sharing stories before this interview about some of the things that we encountered during that experience growing up on military bases around the world. So Felicia, I'd like to turn the stage over to you and have you share a little bit more about yourself and then get into some of the lessons that you've learned along the way as an author.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Vincent, so much for the opportunity. I have been writing really all my life, although I did not start pursuing writing with the idea of being published until I guess it's been almost 20 years now. In 2010, I attended my first writers conference. I had a wonderful friend who convinced me that I had to do that, and I'm so glad that she did. And that's kind of the beginning. And 5 years later, I got my first contract and published my first book through Venfire Publishing. And now 3 books later, 1 more in process, and 2 more under contract, and I'm looking forward to where God is leading my writing next.
I love it. Wow. Well, with that intro, let me advance to the first slide and share your first lesson. And actually, it's a series of slides. And tell us about that title. What's in a name? Exactly what are you trying to share with our group?
So when I first started my first novel, I knew it was going to be set in the Czech Republic, and I knew it was going to be a suspense. And I loved the idea, the play on words of checkmate, that my character, my protagonist, was going to find herself in a situation from which there seemed to be no escape. And everyone I talked to as I was pitching that novel to editors and agents and publishers, they loved that idea. They loved that title. And so when it came under contract, we were excited to go ahead with that same title. You know, a lot of times a publisher will, the writer will suggest a title and the publisher may choose something different. So it's not often the case that the writer's original title remains the title when it gets published. But they loved it and I loved it and we were so happy. It sounded like a great idea, but it was originally, and my first contract was for a series. So I knew there were going to be more books in the series. And so having established kind of this play on words, this short name, that incorporates the location of the story, then I had a challenge. So as I moved on to write the next book, which was set in Bolivia, and this series is about missionary kids in various places around the world. Each book is independent, but they are connected by their relationship online through the International Mission Force website. And so there's a connection between the characters in each book, but they're not the same character in each book. So the next story was taking place in Bolivia, and I wanted to incorporate that same idea of a play on words and how would I do that? And of course, it became more challenging. And so the name Bolivianite actually refers to a stone that is found only in Bolivia. It's half amethyst and half citrine. It's purple and yellow blended together. And there's a folklore story around that stone that relates to the novel itself. So it was and so of course the stone is not spelled Knight, it's spelled Bolivia Nite. But I was again playing with the whole chess term mixed with the location to get that. And so that was a good play on words and worked out okay. But the thing I didn't take into account as I came up with these names that, I patted myself on the back for being so clever about, was that they are challenging to spell. And so when you're sharing with people about your books and you're asking them to go look for them online, you do not want to have to give them a complicated spelling in order for them to find your book. So that was one important lesson learned. The other was, when you're writing a series of books, when you come up with the title for the first one, think about how challenging it's going to be to follow that same pattern with future titles in the series. So when I came to the third book, Kenya Quest, I was really challenged to find, okay, I know it's set in Kenya. I'm using that in it. And I'm looking for a chess term that's going to relate to what's happening in the story. And this really was a quest to overcome the protagonist's lifelong fear of really being challenged or being, stepping out with courage. And so it came together. But what I'm finding as I progress through the series is I've set myself up for an increasing challenge with each new book in terms of finding a title that both represents the story and follows this pattern I've set up of the title, the location, and then chess terms. So the fourth book, which is hopefully due out in the next 6 to 8 months, is titled Island Gambit. It's set in Papua New Guinea, which probably is evident why I chose not to use Papua New Guinea in the title. That's, even more challenging. So my lesson learned for authors as they think about naming their books, as the titles they choose for their books, make it something that's easy for people to spell, that you're not going to have to give them some complicated spelling, no matter how clever you might think it sounds. And make it something that as you plan for future books in this series, you can think of multiple ways that you could continue that same sort of pattern that you established with the first book.
Wow, what awesome advice. And now I've got to rethink the next 3 books. Thanks for the challenge and for the advice.
Sure.
Yeah, it leads to the second lesson. Before the interview started, you were talking about building relationships. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about how that's helped you and how that might help some of the other authors on this call.
Well, writing is a very solitary activity, right? As we're drafting our story, plotting our story, if we're a plotter, as we're editing it, all of that is done alone, maybe in collaboration with someone, but primarily we're on our own. But the process of being an author is not solitary. We need feedback and input from other people. We need encouragement because it can be a very discouraging pursuit. We need to learn from other people. And so instead of when I first started writing, before my dear friend convinced me to attend my first conference, I wrote, it was all very internal, very solitary. I didn't share my writing with other people. It was really something I was doing for myself. And you're not going to be able to move outside of just something that's personally therapeutic into actually getting published unless you're willing to work with other people and integrate those relationships and build those relationships. So as I attended the first conference, one of the first things I benefited from in that was just a validation of all the thoughts that we have as authors, all of the ideas. We talk to our characters sometimes, or we think of them as real people living inside our brains. And non-writers kind of give us the side eye about that a little bit. You're a little bit strange. But when you're surrounded by several hundred other people who also hear those voices in their head. It's just an incredibly encouraging experience, and really builds you up and reminds you that whether you're published or not, whether you're a bestseller or not, whatever stage in this game you're at, you are a writer. And really recognizing yourself as a writer is a huge benefit. So building those relationships. Now, for me, those relationships built at conference included meeting my publisher, meeting my agent, meeting a group that I'm part of that has prayed for one another every week for 10 years now. And then, of course, meeting the folks who then helped me form the North Carolina chapter of ACFW. So one of the things I recognized, apart from conferences, which obviously some of us can go every year, but others can't. So in addition to when we can do conferences, being able to have a more consistent feedback and relationship and encouragement and body around you supporting you as you write, I really felt like we needed a local chapter of the American Christian Fiction Writers group. And we had, I think years before they had one, and it had eventually kind of withered away because the requirements and the time commitment involved in having such a chapter are substantial. And plenty of us feel like it's all I can do to write. If I have 5 minutes extra, I'm going to spend it writing, not building an organization like that. But it was so important to me that I sent out some information to kind of gather interest. Folks expressed a desire to have a chapter in North Carolina again. And so I believe it's been about 4 years ago that we started the North Carolina chapter up, and have continued to grow. I was so excited last year when Kyle Beal assumed the role of president. It gave me a chance to step back from that and allow a new vision, which she has just run with. So, but again, having those relationships that are going to not only encourage you, they're going to challenge you to grow as a writer. They're going to help you understand the business of writing. It's all absolutely critical. So I would encourage you, if you're listening to this and you've been writing and holding your stories close and not really building relationships with other writers, the most valuable thing that you can do to grow as a writer is to engage with other writers.
Interesting. And you had mentioned, that you prayed, that folks were praying with you. These lessons learned episodes, they're expansive. They include some other organizations writing organizations that are not necessarily Christian based. They're more, all genres. But if you could tell us a little bit, the people that are on this particular call that will be joining us asynchronously later, probably are people who are writing Christian fiction, which is hopefully why they're drawn to this particular episode and future like this. Can you tell us a little bit about the group and what does it mean to be a Christian fiction writer?
So Christian fiction is a genre of fiction. There are a variety of genres within that overarching umbrella, right? So there's suspense, there's thrillers, there's romance, there's romantic suspense, there's young adult, there's you name it. Virtually any genre that exists in the broader market also exists within the Christian fiction market. I guess I would exclude erotica. Probably don't have that in Christian fiction. The key component of Christian fiction is that it's written by somebody who espouses a belief in Christian doctrines, right? So there's a broad array. For me, one of the keys is writing actually transformational Christian fiction. So instead of writing novels that simply have a little sprinkling of Christian prayer or Christian ideas in them, or things of that nature, or they're clean fiction, so they don't have anything that would be overtly offensive to people of faith. In my view, transformational Christian fiction allows people to not only see the truth of who God is, but also see the truth of who they are in relationship to God, and it inspires them to make changes to draw nearer to God. So that's kind of the view that I take of Christian fiction, and specifically transformational Christian fiction.
Wow.
Did I answer that? I hope I answered what you were
did.
asking.
Thank you. You did, Felicia. And my mind is churning because, some of the works that I've written, I walk a fine line. They are fiction. They do have a Christian base. They start usually with a scripture. But one of the challenges that I have, and I think others must have, is how do you write that Christian book, get across a message without being didactic? Without being, for lack of a better term, a Bible banger. Because as soon as you go down that path, you just lose some of your audience, people who are maybe not yet saved but are called to be saved. So, yeah, very, very helpful, and the relationships. Being a part of this association has helped me immensely. I remember it was the last time we were able to get together. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. It was at one of the homes, and you had a guest speaker. This was before we went into Zoom world, while we were still actually able to meet over a cup of coffee in a living room. But I had one book that I had published, and the guest speaker, I had talked to her and asked her about the receptivity of that book, and she said, "Well, sometimes you write a book and you have to just let it go, and that one is between you and God." And it's like, whoa, okay, I get it. It's like, put it down and move on, right? I'm going to advance the slide. And by the way, Felicia, I apologize. I advanced the slide before while you were talking. So for the viewers that are saying, why did it skip and then go back? That's because operator error. But we kept on track, so that's fine. The third lesson that you had talked about sharing before we started the interview was to share what you've learned. And I wonder if you could expand on that just a little bit.
Well, I think we're always growing and learning. And I know for me, sometimes I can feel like I'm still such a beginner, and I am. When I compare myself to even members of our group who have written far more than I have won far more awards, and so forth, we can feel as if we are still we can feel like imposters, for one thing. We can feel as if we have nothing to offer. But the reality is, when I reflect back on what I've learned since I first started, I've learned a tremendous amount. And there are folks who need to learn what I have learned, and I can share those things. And the person who is on book number 50 and has, been a bestseller, and they're living off of their royalties, may not be able to really speak to where that person who's just starting out is. So it's important for those of us, wherever we are along this journey, to reach back to those who are starting behind us, who are just getting started, and who need to learn the lessons that we've gained along the way. And one of the greatest examples of this that I just love, in terms of just supporting one another and encouraging one another in this, is when I was going to the Writers Conference, and the conference that I've been to most often is the Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference. It happens at Ridgecrest, usually every spring. This year, they're actually coming up in just a couple of weeks. And so a friend of mine and I were headed up there, and we went up a day early because a friend that we had met at a previous conference was releasing her very first book the day before the conference. She was going to be doing a book signing in Asheville at the Barnes & Noble there. And we wanted to be there for her, just to encourage her, just to celebrate her first novel coming out and getting a book signing at Barnes & Noble. How exciting is that? So we joined her there to celebrate that, and happened to meet her publisher there. I don't know how many publishers attend book signings for their uh, authors, but and so it certainly wasn't anything that we expected. But as we were speaking to her, and she asked what we were doing there, and we explained we were going to the writers' conference, and she asked what we wrote, and I shared the story for my novel. She scribbled her name and number and email on literally a piece of paper torn out of some notepad she had, and handed it to me and said, "I want you to send me that." And she, in fact, ended up being the publisher that I signed with for this series. So it's just a beautiful illustration of, we don't know where God is going to put us in connection with the person he wants to use to help us grow, to help us develop as a writer, or to help us get published. But if we are focused more on encouraging others and supporting others than we are on kind of clawing our way to the top, I believe that he puts us in the right place at the right time to make those connections.
Well, I 100% agree with that, Felicia. I think that's why we're on this call, and why we all belong to that chapter, and continue to encourage folks through things like lessons learned.
Absolutely.
So it's a lonely world out there, and people don't realize that there are resources available if they only but take advantage of them and listen to the word that internally, that word of God that drives their path. I have a slide, I've advanced it. I think you might be able to see it on your screen, that has all three of your books. Can you tell us a little bit more about International Mission Force?
So this series was born out of the first international mission trip that I took with my oldest daughter when she was 12 years old. We went to the Czech Republic and served there for several weeks. When we came back, she said, "I want to read about missionaries." And we looked for books, and of course there were plenty of biographies of Amy Carmichael and Hudson Taylor and so on. And she said, "But I want to read about people like that girl we met in Prague, who was 15 years old, and she and her parents picked up and left everything behind to serve the Lord there." And I couldn't find anything like that. And as I thought about it, I thought, wouldn't it be great to have stories that have the adventure and excitement of an Indiana Jones, which gives you a clue as to how long ago this was when I had this idea. But that kind of excitement and fast pace, but also incorporate a biblical worldview and the passion and excitement of following God in your life, and also incorporates the culture. We talked about being Army brats, and one of the blessings of that is gaining an understanding of cultures that are different from your own, and gaining a respect for those differences and the beauty of that diversity. And most American teens don't have that opportunity. They spend their entire lives in the same town or the same state. And I wanted to be able to give them a glimpse of another culture. And so that's kind of where the International Mission Force began. And so the concept is that these are each different characters in different countries facing different battles, and they connect with one another online at a website called the International Mission Force, where they share their prayer concerns, they share what's going on where they are, to the extent that they can. Some of them are in countries where they can't say where they're at because it's not safe for them to be there. So that's kind of overview of the International Mission Force.
Well, Felicia, you are so blessed, and you are a blessing to so many through your work, and I can't wait to see the next book. I just want to thank you for being a part of this story. The lessons learned, we continue to make these available to folks who subscribe to our channel. People can learn more about that channel at hiddentreasurenovels.com. But I again want to thank you. I want to thank all of all of the folks that are out on this call. I encourage you to, if you're a Christian writer, check into the Association of Christian Fiction Writers, check into the North Carolina chapter, reach out to Felicia, or you can reach out through this website as well. I wish you all a wonderful day and a blessed weekend. And thank you, Felicia, again, for all that you're doing and all that you plan to do. And God bless you, seriously.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it, Vincent.
Thank you.